Hello everyone, we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Microsoft Dynamics GP Year-End Planning for Payroll. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us. There are a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please either raise your hand and we can unmute your line or ask them through the GoToWebinar question box. We'll be taking questions throughout the presentation and also be following up afterwards for any questions that you think of after the presentation is over today. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. We have Jeff Smith, who is a solutions architect here at Socius. For over 20 years, Jeff has specialized in project management, product engineering, and consulting for Microsoft Dynamics solutions. So Jeff, at this point, I believe we're ready to transition over to you to cover session objectives.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Cheryl, I appreciate it, and thanks to everyone on the line. Hopefully you'll find today's presentation useful. What we're going to do today is we're going to cover the Dynamics GP payroll year-end closing process, and not only the steps that you go through, but also some considerations that you need to put in place as you go through this process, as payroll is a very sensitive issue and we want to make sure that you do it just right. Tomorrow we will also be covering, and we'll talk about this a little later, but we'll be covering year-end closing for the rest of the Dynamics GP suite. So first of all, our agenda is, and our goals are really to review the common calendar year-end process for payroll and provide you with tips and tricks for preparing for the year-end. We'll actually review a year-end checklist, provide you with an overview and some comments as we go through that, and then step through the windows in Dynamics GP so that you can actually see what we're referring to. So first of all, I wanted to start off with some recommendations. Sometimes, especially if you haven't done this before, this task can seem somewhat daunting. The actual process itself is not difficult, but really the preparation for it and make sure your timing is right is probably of the essence here. So we have a few recommendations. First of all, use your resources. If you have questions or if you're not sure before you get started, you have a variety of different ways that you can get information. First of all, customer source. For any of you that are Dynamics GP clients and you're actually on an annual maintenance plan with Microsoft, you have access to customer source, which is Microsoft's Dynamics website, and there are knowledge base and help and support options that are available to you there. Also, Microsoft Dynamics GP solution support. So you certainly can reach out to Microsoft and go through that process as well. Or certainly we encourage you to work with Socius and our client care team in regards to any questions you may have. Also, I think the essence of all of this is just make sure you're prepared. So make sure that all of your day-to-day activities are completed and you're ready to focus in on the year-end process. Payroll has a few more steps than the typical module, and so it's really important to make sure that you have everything done, and we'll talk through that checklist to make sure that you do. Also, it's very important to just be methodical. So when we talk about customer source, I'll refer to a knowledge base article that you can get on customer source here in just a minute. But it's important to be methodical as you follow down through that checklist. Also, verify if there are any ISVs that you're using, that there's no conflict there. Typically with payroll, you're fairly safe. And make sure that you make backups. I'm always of the opinion it's better to be safe than sorry. And so we want to make sure that this is not a terrible experience for you in regards to having to recover from some interruption of some sort. So certainly feel free to make backups as the checklist recommends. Some other resources that you have at your fingertips is GPUG, or the GP user group community. You certainly have the ability to go out to the GPUG website and find articles that refer to the payroll year-end closing, and for that matter, for any of the year-end closings. Also, there's a website called gpwindow.com that there's a number of different people that contribute to that. One of the Dynamics GP, what they call MVPs, is Victoria Uden. Victoria has a website and has some recommendations as well. And then lastly, there's one called Dynamic Accounting. So certainly feel free to reach out and refer to any of those. And I'm sure there's more. If you have others that you use, that's great too. But certainly feel free to make sure before you get started that you're comfortable with what needs to get done. As I just said a little bit ago with Customer Source, there is a knowledge base article for payroll that is article number 850663. And just for those of you who are veterans at this, that year-end checklist number actually doesn't change from year to year. The content gets updated based upon the versions that are supported and so forth, so it's really important to just use that number, go out and get the checklist, and it'll get you the most updated version of that. We will talk a little bit about compatibility and which version you're on, so we want to make sure that and that gets referenced in that knowledge-based article as well. So the year-end checklist is going to, this is just a generalization for all modules, but finalize any applicable transactions, reconcile your sub-modules to your general ledger, print any necessary reports and file, and make a backup when finished. So do all of that prior to closing your year-end. And that applies whether you're using payroll or any of the other modules that are out there. So the first screen that I'm going to show you really is applicable for all of the module year-end closings, but this is actually the fiscal period setup window. And so you're going to notice that in the rows you're going to see each individual period, and you're going to see then on the columns each of the different series, including payroll. So you have the ability to actually close at the end of each month, close out each period, and as part of our checklist, you'll see a reference to that in regards to closing the periods, and after you do your end close, closing out the last period of the year. The other thing you're going to notice is this is where we set up each year. So if you're on a calendar year or if you're on a fiscal year, the year has to be set up so that we can process the transactions properly from each module. And so obviously before we start work in 2016, we need to make sure that 2016 is defined. And that's not just true for payroll, but that's true for all of your modules. So I am probably going to refer at some point to this fiscal period setup window, and just want to make sure that you know how to get to that. When I do screenshots, I'm going to give you a path to get to that window. My assumption is that you're using 2013 or 2015, which are the most recent and the supported versions. These paths do also apply if you're on 2010, and we will talk a little bit about 2010 and how the payroll, what the limitations are for payroll year-end close for that. All right. So there's really two different checklists. So I'm going to go down through the checklist, and then I'm going to go back after we're done with the checklist and go through the screen, so we kind of get a double look at these, the particulars of what I'm talking about. So if you're going to print your 2015 W-2s before you run a 2016 pay run, there's a checklist. If you're going to run your W-2s after you run a 2016 pay run, there's a different checklist, and there's a subtle difference in the list, so I've included both of those here. And so I just want to make sure that you are okay with what, the differentiation here. The other thing I just wanted to say is that you're not required to run the W-2s prior to your first run in 2016, and that'll become clear as we look through the checklist and actually look at the screens and have a better understanding of what each one of those does. So So I'm going to kind of go down through this. I'm going to review it, and then we'll go back through a second checklist, which would be if you're running the statements after your first 2016 pay run. So if we're going to run the W-2s prior to the 2016 pay run, we should complete all 2015 pay runs. So whatever your pay cycle is, that last run that will be sometime in December needs to be completed, even if that's on the last day of the month. So we need to make sure that our 2015 pay runs are done as a first step. The next step is we need to make sure that we've completed all payroll month-end, period-end, and quarter-end procedures. It's important to make sure those procedures are done prior to actually doing your year-end. The next step, and this will make sense when we look at screens, is you want to make a backup of your 2015 company database, and typically we label that backup a pre-year-end wage file. So what that means is that we're going to create, as part of our year-end process, we're going to create a year-end wage file. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So what we want to do is run our last pay runs. We want to run our month-end process, our quarter-end process prior to making this backup, and then we'll label that backup a pre-year-end wage file. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to install the U.S. year-end wage or year-end update. So just as a point of reference, each year there is going to be what's called a year-end update, and then typically there's also going to be a tax update. So the year-end update, what it does is it prepares you to run the year-end process. So if there, an example of where that comes in is if there's changes to the W-2 form for this year, then this year-end update will be run or loaded, and therefore you'll be using the latest and greatest W-2 format. But the one thing that you need to understand is that the year-end update is in essence a service pack. So there not only are there payroll updates in there to prepare you for year-end, but there also can be additional updates to other modules within your system. And so Microsoft provides us with knowledge base information and announcements that will tell us what those other updates are. But that really, in essence, that year-end update is a service pack, or however you want to refer to it. It is certainly an update that crosses over beyond U.S. payroll. The next thing that we do is then we're going to create this year-end wage file. And we'll look at that window here in a minute, but in essence, creating the year-end wage file is going to transfer all of the transaction data from payroll for the calendar year, and it's going to move it into another table. That other table then could be used for your year-end process of W-2s. And now one of the things we're going to end up talking about is also the Affordable Care Act. And so it also can be used to update for your production of your 1095 documents as well. So once you've created the year-end wage file, we encourage you to make another backup of your 2015 company database and label this backup post-year-end wage file. So you notice that we ran our last pay run, we did our month-end, quarter-end procedures, we made a backup, we called that pre-year-end wage. We then installed the U.S. tax update and we create the year-end wage file. We then make another backup. So we've made 2 backups thus far just to get us to a point where we're ready to then edit and review our W-2s and our 1099s. Okay, so next step beyond that is then to verify the W-2 and 1099-R statement information, and I'll show you those windows here in just a minute. And then if there's any changes that you make, we'll make another backup. Okay, now if all is the way it should be, you know, you'll review those and they should be correct, and then you can move on. And then following that, you're going to print your W-2 validation report. You're going to print your W-2 statements. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit beyond the printing of statements, but also then the filing, electronic filing of those W-2s as well. And then lastly, there's a W-3 transmittal form, which is a summary of the W-2 statement activity. Okay, so we've gotten a lot done here, but again, creating that year-end wage file clears out your payroll tables to allow you to begin the processing of 2016 pay runs, and sets the data aside for the process of W-2s, Affordable Care Act, 1099-Rs, etc. All right, so once we're done with the W-2s, then we can print the 1099-R validation report, the forms themselves, and then the 1096, which is the 1099-R equivalent of the W-3. If required, then you can prepare and submit your W-2 information to the in the federal EFW-2 format, which is the electronic filing of your federal tax, okay, and so your federal payroll report, W-2s. And so, just so you know, with GP Payroll, W-2s can be filed electronically with the federal government, and that's it. So GP does not do any kind of state or local filing of W-2s. And so there, we will talk about some alternatives in regards to that if you need. Okay, then we have basically some additional steps that are optional. If you're using the HR module, the Human Resources module, you can archive information for inactive employees. Okay, you can, and I'm going to come back to the fiscal periods for 2016. We kind of referenced that already. Delete the HR information for inactive employees, and then we can close the fiscal periods for the payroll series for the 2015 year. All right, so I'm going to go back a few slides, and I'm going to come back to this. Let's see if I can. There we go. This window. So when we refer to closing the periods, we simply can check mark the boxes in the payroll column to close each period, and what they're encouraging you to do is then close the last period of the year as part of your year-end process. The other step that's in this checklist is then to create the new year. So in this case, we'd be creating calendar or your next fiscal year so that you can run payroll. All right, so I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable. We're going to refer back to that window. And then lastly, we're going to install the 2016 payroll tax update. So there are two updates that are installed as part of the payroll year-end. The first one is the year-end update, and that's a pre-W-2 process. And then we're going to install the 2016 payroll tax update, and that would be something you'd want to install as a pre-first pay run of the new year, or in this case 2016. So what that allows us to do is load those tax updates so that we're prepared to be following the proper tax rates for the new year. Okay, so this is our checklist if we're running the 2015 statements before the 2016 pay runs. Now, I'm going to go through this a little quicker, but this is the difference if you're going to run your pay runs before you run your 2015 statements. And frankly, this is a more common way of going about it. Most people don't run their W-2s before they run their first pay run of the new year. Now, there are exceptions because we know that we can do different pay frequencies. So if you pay, you know, mid and end of month, or if you pay once a month, those types of things, you may find that it behooves you to be able to do the W-2s prior to. So that's why we offer you two different checklists. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to complete all the 2015 pay runs. Again, we're going to complete all the month-end, period-end, and quarter-end procedures. We're going to make a backup of our 2015 company database, and we're going to, again, label it the pre-year-end wage file. we're going to install the 2015 year-end update. And again, to reference, this happens before you create the year-end wage file. And that is really important to make sure that you have the year-end update loaded before you create the year-end wage file. We're going to make another backup. We're going to verify our W-2 and 1099 information. And then notice our next step here is to optionally archive our HR information for inactive employees. Oops. And then I'll set up my periods for 2016. So you can see that the steps are really the same. They're just in a different order when we're doing it this way. We can clear our HR information for inactive employees, and again, that's optional. Close the fiscal periods. That's the screen I just referred to a few minutes ago. Install the 2016 payroll tax update, and then begin processing the 2016 pay runs. So this is a more natural process for many of you who pay weekly or biweekly and are going to run those first pay runs prior to running your W-2s. So then from there, we're going to print our W-2 validation report, our statements, and our W-3s. We're going to print our 1099-Rs if those are appropriate, and the 1096, and then we're going to prepare and submit our W-2 information to the federal government if appropriate. And so that's not required for everyone. I think there's a 250 employee limit for that. All right, so hopefully, and you can refer back to these checklists, but you also can go on to Customer Source and get the Microsoft version of these checklists. I think this is going to be fairly accurate and ready for you right from these slide decks. And I think that we have, we're going to make this slide deck available to you, so you certainly will have this to use as a reference. So a couple things I wanted you to know. The GP 2015 payroll year-end update has been released, and you can load this now anytime before the end of the year and before you build your year-end wage file. And it was released on the 23rd of November. The 2013 version of the payroll year-end update was released on the 20th. So if you're on 2013 or 2015, these updates have been released and are ready for your loading at any point prior to doing your building your year-end wage file. The 2016 payroll tax update is scheduled to release probably in about a week. So you should expect that we'll get an announcement to that effect. So all of the updates for 2016 pay runs will be made available. But again, that doesn't mean you necessarily load it right away. We want to make sure that we finish our current year updates prior to loading the 2016 tax updates. And for any of you that may be out there that are on GP 2010 or prior, there are no payroll year-end or tax updates for GP 2010 or prior, I should have said here. So just keep in mind that is indeed the case. All right, so now I really wanted to just kind of walk through some of the major screens that you're going to encounter. And again, I think part of our hope was to give you a really good look at the checklist and knowing what the preparation was, what backups you should do, you know, all of that should be as part of our checklist. But these windows are then the windows that you're going to use, and they're actually, many of them are very simple. But I did want to make sure that you knew how to get to them. Cheryl, you got anything?
Yeah, I do have one question here. If you have a minute, I'm going to unmute Judy's line. She has a question for you. Go ahead, Judy. Judy, your line's unmuted, so you can ask your question, or you can type it in the box and I can ask it if there's audio issues. Jeff, you can probably keep going. I'll let you know once she types that in.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay, so the actual process, the steps that we go through are all going to be handled mostly under the routines area inside of Payroll. So if you're familiar with that, this is where we'll find most of these processes. So I'm assuming that we're going to use the menu bar on the side of your Dynamics GP. We're going to select HR and Payroll. We'll then select routines, the routines area, and then we're going to select year-end closing. So the actual year-end closing function is what creates the year-end wage file. So you can see in my demo data, my company is in 2017. So this is the screen that you're going to see. It's very simple. It's going to be the screen that you see that will allow you to build the file that then clears out the new year file for the next year's processing and moves all of this data for your year-end processing for your W-2s, your 1099-Rs, your 1095s, etc. So in this, Cheryl, have you got a question yet?
Yep, I do have that question that came through. The process 2016 pay run closed the periods for 2016. Should that be for 2015?
Yes. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Judy. I got a little too quick there with my typing. Good catch. Let's go back to that just so we can talk to that. Okay. Close the fiscal periods. This should actually refer to 2015. And I'll make sure that that gets updated before we post this. Thanks for catching. Any others, Cheryl?
No, that's it. We're ready to go on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right, so once you've built the year-end wage file, then you can create what's called a year-end wage report. And this allows you to then basically get a look at all of the employees, or you can make some restrictions so you can look at particular employees for the year. And so step one is to run the year-end closing, which builds the year-end wage report, and then this allows you to print the year-end wage report. Ultimately, from there, we have the ability to edit our W-2s. This window right here allows us to edit our W-2s. So from this window, we pull our year, we pull our employee, it'll bring in the Social Security number, their address, and this will list all of their particulars right here. You'll notice that there is a 1095C button here as well. So we can do the same process in this window for the 1095C as we do for the W-2. Okay. Now, we're not covering in this presentation what needs to get set up in GP in the HR module to track the Affordable Care Act information. This is actually just the actual closing process. We will talk a little bit at the end about some of your alternatives around 1095, especially if you haven't been able to make any progress yet toward getting ready for year end. So I do want to make sure that you're aware of that. All right, so then once you've done any edits, and again, if you remember in the checklist, they say if you make some edits, then maybe go back and do another backup. So just keep that in mind. This is all part of the process. The next thing you're going to do from a W-2 perspective is you're going to actually print those W-2s. All right, and so from here, we do have the ability to print the W-2 forms. And notice that there's a number of options in this box that I've highlighted. So you can see the W-2 form alignment and the W-2 form, the W-3, which is the accumulation of all of the W-2s, but also this is the window that you'll print your 1095Cs and your 1094 transmittal. Now, it's important to note that Dynamics GP by itself does not electronically file for Affordable Care Act, for ACA. It does not electronically file your 1094. So there are tools to do that, and again, I'll refer back to that. But this is the window where you actually will print your W-2s. And so for those of you who print them, this is where they are. We'll also talk a little bit later about some areas where we can have employees have access to their W-2s via a portal. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. All right, and then we go through a similar process in regards to our 1099-Rs. All right, and so this is the editing form, and you'll notice again, here's all the information and you can make your edits and backup if you need to. And then this is where you'll actually print those 1099s. So again, the 1099-R, we have an alignment form, the form itself, and then the 1096 transmittal form. So this is not the hard part. The hard part's getting ready for everything, making sure your data is proper, and etc. All right, so then for those of you that need to electronically file for federal government, this is the window that you'll have. And again, it's HR and payroll, go to routines, go to W-2 electronic filing. All right, so all of that kind of works together. And so I'm going to kind of go back one more time. We're going to talk about this just a little bit more in regards to we showed you the window where you build your year-end wage file. From that, you have the ability to edit W-2s or 1099s. You also, at that point, just to reiterate, once you've built that year-end wage file, you can begin processing of your new year payrolls because everything's been isolated for 2015, and you'll be ready to move forward with 2016 as long as we've done the proper steps in those checklists. So the year-end, so the tax updates, Microsoft provides us with tax updates at two levels. They provide us with tax updates at the federal level, and they provide us tax updates at the state level. Microsoft does not provide updates at the local level, and so it's our obligation to make those updates on our own if those change at the beginning of the year. Or we'll have some options that I'll talk about in a little bit about some tools that we can use that will allow us to make those updates, have those updates happen automatically. So from here, what we do is, if you're familiar with the Dynamics GP window button that's at the top of your window in the left, you can go there, you select maintenance, U.S. payroll tax updates, and then check for tax updates. And so what this will do is it will then allow you to get those updates downloaded into your system. It will ask you for a code, which you'll have as part of your license. So, all right. So I'm going to stop for a minute because we've kind of gone through those checklists. We've gone through those screens to reiterate those checklists. Cheryl, do we have any additional questions that have come through so far?
Nope, it looks like we're good to keep going.
All right, very good then. All right, so then the next step that I wanted to talk about is there are additional add-on modules that are available, and we work with two companies in particular that really provide very complementary products to the Dynamics GP Payroll and HR Suite. One of them is called Integrity Data, and the other one is called Greenshades. And if you can see their websites here if you want to investigate this a little bit more on your own. Integrity Data and Greenshades both provide Affordable Care Act solutions, as well as a variety of others. And so I'm kind of going to go through both of those here in just a moment. So this slide was actually provided to us from Integrity Data, but it really applies to the rules and the timing of much of this. So right now, today, we have 54 days remaining, approximately 54 days remaining. So February 1st, 2016 is an important date because the Form 1095-Cs have to be the employees by then. February 29th is another key date because the Form 1094-C has to be to the IRS. And then on March 31st, 2016, e-filing of the 1094-C is required. So just keep these dates in mind, and certainly make sure that you're validating, and we don't want to keep you from meeting any deadlines that you have. Okay, but keep those dates; they're very, very important. So now, if you are an organization that is required to participate under the Affordable Care Act, then there are some penalties for not participating. And so here's a couple pieces of information you may want to know. So first of all, it's $173.67 a month per employee times all eligible employees, and that's your penalty for offering no coverage. Okay, so these guidelines are cast in stone at this point. It's $260.50 a month per employee times the number of full-time employees who got subsidized coverage on an exchange. So if employees went out and were who got a subsidized coverage on the exchange, that's a penalty for offering non-compliant coverage. All right. And there's a $500 per required form penalty for not filing. So these things are pretty compelling, as many of you are probably small to medium-sized businesses, and certainly these numbers can become large depending on how many employees you have. So we want to make sure that you're aware of these things. And if you haven't prepared yet for this, and many of you already have, but if you have not prepared yet, don't panic yet, because there are some tools available that can still be deployed in time to make sure that we meet these deadlines. So I'm going to first talk about Integrity Data, and they have a ACA compliance solution, and it does compliance and reporting. So you can look, if you look at this circle here, you can see that the different slices are the different functions that this provides. Okay, so Dynamics GP on its own will allow you to print the 1095 and file the 1094, but it won't e-file. So the Integrity Data product will allow that to happen. From a penalty perspective, it tracks eligibility. Okay, and then it is the support team that they provide knows ACA backwards and forwards, so that's really important, and it provides automatic updates and alerts. So it doesn't just work with Dynamics GP. This is actually a web-based solution that can work very well with Dynamics GP, and Integrity Data knows GP as well as anyone. There's no prerequisites. It's actually very quick to deploy. I've heard it's less than a day to actually get it in place. My recommendation is, if you haven't done anything yet and you're interested in this, you should probably be reaching out to your associate account manager or your consultant that you work with to make sure that you're acting on this. They do provide user group webinars and customer care, and it is a cloud-based solution, so it's always up to date with the latest rules. Okay, so what I wanted to do next is talk about what the Greenshades tools are that are available. So just like Integrity Data, Greenshades provides eligibility tracking. It also has some other tools that that may be useful for you as well. So they have a product called the Payroll Inspector, and it's kind of a versatile product. It does eligibility tracking. It actually also provides you with local tax rate updates automatically rather than a manual process that you would have to do in GP. It also provides, just like Integrity Data does, the e-filing for the ACA 1095. And that tool does it if you're using payroll only. They also have a tool called the Greenshades Center for 1099, and they've bundled the 1095 for ACA if you're using HR and track ACA. So if you're trying to use GP for your Affordable Care Act compliance, then this will at least do the electronic filing portion for you. Okay. Greenshades also provides an online employee services portal, which allows you to have W-2s online. So an employee can actually go to a portal and actually look at their W-2, print their W-2, etc. And then lastly, Greenshades Center or their payroll tax service products will actually allow you to do state and local tax filing. So as we talk about what's in GP versus what has to be augmented using these tools, hopefully this will give you at least a summary. And I pointed out their website so that you can take a look. Associates can actually arrange a discussion with some of their experts at Greenshades or Integrity Data, and we can even arrange demonstrations. So I will tell you that time is crunching down, so it's important for you guys to, if you haven't acted already, to kind of get this under control and start moving forward. So anyway, that's what I wanted to make sure you were aware of there. One last thing that I didn't mention, and I don't have a slide for, is that the HR module does have a payroll and HR in GP does have a self-service functionality that is available that will allow employees to not only see pay stubs but W-2s. And so it's similar to what Greenshades does, and it's built in. So we want to talk about how you get to that point, but that does require that you're on Dynamics GP 2015. Okay. All right, just a couple other quick tips, and this came from a couple of our implementers. First of all, they said if you're processing your first 2016 payroll prior to January, but it's going to be a January pay. So say it's the 30th of December, but you're going to go ahead and process the pay for January because it's going to go out on the 2nd, and everyone's going to be out for the holidays. So, so you're running the payroll, but it's after you built your year-end wage file, which it needs to be. Their recommendation is to just make sure that you change the system date to the January pay date. That becomes very important. And then I'm just going to go back to what I was saying earlier, is just make sure that you follow your checklist precisely, and be real cautious and make backups. And if something seems unclear in the checklist, or if you just want to validate something, certainly feel comfortable reaching out to associates and your account manager or your lead consultant, and we'll be glad to make sure that we answer those questions to make sure you're comfortable before you move forward. All right, so we have about 15 minutes remaining, and so I'm certainly available to answer the questions that I can, and I know that Cheryl has a few things she wanted to talk about as well.
Yes, and thanks, Jeff. And to remind everyone, you can either submit a question by raising your hand, and I can unmute your line, or type them into the GoToWebinar question box, and I can relay them to Jeff so that he can answer those questions. And wanted to cover a couple more things here. All upcoming events and current promotions can be found on our site at socius1.com. Our 2016 GP webinar schedule has not yet been posted, but we have some exciting things we're planning in the pipeline, and we'll certainly share that out with you as soon as it is available. And we also wanted to remind you that Microsoft will be increasing additional user pricing on January 1st. This affects GP module-based licensing and business-ready licensing. So if you're thinking of purchasing additional users, you want to do that for the first of the year. Additional promotions including $1,000 off E1 Smart List Builder, 10% off Professional Advantage Company Data Archive, and 20% off Greenshades purchase can be found on our site under Resources Promotional Offers. So here are a couple of questions coming in, Jeff.
Okay, and can I give you one last reminder?
Yeah.
We do have our the year-end webinar tomorrow at the same time for all of the additional Dynamics GP modules that apply, such as general ledger, payables, receivables, etc. So we certainly want you to feel comfortable giving, reaching out and attending that one as well.